Oh, you think you know war. You think it's lines on a map, flags in the wind, and the clear distinction between us and them. But what if I told you that the most devastating conflict of the last decade wasn't fought over land or resources or ideology? What if it was fought over a glitch? A single, catastrophic error in a logistics algorithm that turned two allied peacekeeping forces into mortal enemies, blind to each other's true identities? This isn't a story about superheroes. It's about Sergeant Elias Thorne, a man who didn't fire a single shot in anger until he realized the enemy wearing the black mask was using the same tactical hand signals his best friend had taught him in boot camp. It's about the silence between radio bursts. It's about the horror of realizing that every order you follow might be leading you to kill your own reflection. If you've ever wondered how thin the line is between duty and madness, stay with me. Because for 3 days in the frozen hell of the Kalen Valley, I didn't just fight a war. I commanded both sides of it. And the cost of winning was losing everything I thought was real. The cold in the Kalen Valley doesn't just bite, it gnaws. It gets into the marrow of your bones and stays there, a permanent resident that reminds you every second of every day that you are soft, warm meat in a world made of ice and steel. I was huddled behind a ridge of jagged granite, my breath pluming and short, controlled bursts before vanishing into the gray mist. My name is Sergeant Elias Thorne, 4th Reconnaissance Battalion, United Coalition Forces. Or, at least, that's who I was when I woke up that morning. By nightfall, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. Sarge, my toes are numb. Like, actually gone. I think they fell off 3 miles back, whispered Miller, my point man. He was 19, with a face that still held the softness of youth despite the grime, and the 1,000-yard stare beginning to cloud his eyes. He shifted his weight, the snow crunching softly under his boots. "Keep them moving, Miller," I said, my voice low, barely audible over the wind. "Wiggle them. If they're gone, you won't feel the wiggle. If you feel the wiggle, they're still there. Stop complaining and check your sector." Miller grinned, a flash of white teeth in the gloom. "Yes, Sarge." Wiggling. Vigorously. Behind us, crouched in the defilade of the rock formation, was the rest of Fireteam Echo. There was Vasquez, our heavy weapons specialist, a woman who could strip a machine gun blindfolded and reassemble it while reciting poetry. She was currently checking the action on her MK-48, her movements rhythmic and soothing. Next to her was Chun, our tech and comms expert, a slight man with thick glasses fogged up by the cold, tapping furiously on a ruggedized tablet that looked more like a brick than a computer. And finally, there was Doc Holloway, our medic who was currently trying to thaw a ration pack with his body heat. We were deep behind what we thought were enemy lines. The Separatist Front, SEPFOR, as we called them, had been pushing hard into the valley for weeks. Our mission was simple: locate their forward command post, tag it with a laser designator, and let the air wing turn into glass. Simple, clean, efficient, but nothing in Kalen was clean. "Chun," I said, keeping my eyes on the tree line ahead. "Any chatter? I want to know if they know we're here." Chun didn't look up. His fingers flew across the screen. "Static, Sarge. Heavy jamming. It's like someone dumped a bucket of noise into the spectrum. I'm picking up fragments, though. Encrypted bursts. Short range. They're talking to each other, but I can't break the cipher. It's weird." "Weird how?" Vasquez asked, not looking up from her weapon. "The encryption key," Chun muttered, frowning. "It's rotating too fast. Military grade, obviously, but the pattern is familiar. It feels like our own handshake protocol, but inverted, like a mirror image." I frowned. "Mirror image? That's impossible. SEPFOR uses Soviet-era legacy systems. We use NATO-standard digital encryption. They don't mix." "Tell that to the signal," Chun said, tapping the screen harder. "Wait, I got a hit. One channel is open. Unencrypted. Probably a mistake. Someone left their mic hot." He patched the audio through to our earpieces. At first, there was only the sound of wind, identical to the wind whipping around our heads. Then a voice. Young. Terrified. "Command, this is Unit 7 Alpha. We are pinned down at grid reference 44 Bravo. Taking heavy fire from the North Ridge. Requesting immediate support. They're using drones. Repeat, they're using hunter-killer drones. We are bleeding out here." I froze. Grid reference 44 Bravo. That was less than 2 clicks east of our current position. And we were on the North Ridge. Did you hear that? Miller whispered, his humor gone. They're saying we're attacking them. We are attacking them, Vasquez said dryly. That's the job. No, I said, a cold knot forming in my stomach. We haven't fired a shot in 6 hours. We've been moving silent. We haven't deployed any drones. Our drone support was grounded due to the storm. Jim pulled his headphones off one ear. Sarge, he's right. The timestamp on that transmission, it's live. But look at the metadata. He turned the tablet toward me. The signal origin wasn't coming from a Sepfer base. It was coming from a mobile unit. A unit that was broadcasting on a frequency reserved for coalition emergency channels. That's a coalition frequency, Doc Holloway said, his voice tight. Why are Sepfer troops broadcasting on our emergency band? They're not Sepfer, I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. Or they're not who we think they are. Before anyone could respond, the air split open. It wasn't the sharp crack of a sniper rifle. It was the thunderous roar of an artillery barrage. The ground beneath us jumped. Snow and rock sprayed into the air. I dove flat, pressing my face into the ice. Contact! Contact front! Vasquez screamed, rolling on her side and bringing her machine gun up. Tracers lit up the twilight, streaks of red and green tearing through the mist. Bullets impacted the rock above my head, sending shards of stone raining down on my helmet. I scrambled to my knees, raising my rifle. Through the scope, I saw shapes moving in the treeline below. Dark uniforms, black helmets, the signature look of the Separatist elite guard. Engage! I shouted, suppressing fire. Vasquez, keep their heads down. Miller, flank left. Chun, give me a drone feed now. Vasquez opened up, the heavy thump-thump-thump of her machine gun providing a wall of lead. Miller sprinted to the left, disappearing into the shadows. I fired controlled pairs, aiming for center mass. I saw one figure drop, then another. But something was wrong. Their movement. It was too coordinated, too precise. Sepfer fighters were brave, fierce, but they fought with a chaotic intensity. These men moved like water. They flowed from cover to cover, using bounding Overwatch tactics that we had drilled into ourselves for years. Chun, where's that feed? I yelled, reloading. I'm trying. The jamming is spiking. Chun shouted back. Wait, I'm in. I have a visual. A small screen on my wrist comp flickered to life. It showed the feed from our overhead surveillance drone, which had finally managed to punch through the interference. I looked at the screen, and my blood ran cold. The figures we were shooting at weren't wearing Sepfer insignia. They were wearing coalition patches. Specifically, they were wearing the patch of the 2nd Infantry Division. The Iron Bulls. Our allies. Our friends. Cease fire. I screamed, my voice cracking. Cease fire. Vasquez, stop. Vasquez didn't stop immediately. Adrenaline is a powerful drug. But she heard the terror in my voice and lifted her barrel. The gunfire from the treeline stopped a second later. Silence rushed back into the valley, heavier than before. What the hell, Sarge? Miller's voice came over the comms, shaky. Why do we stop? I had a clean shot on their commander. Look at your wrist comp, I said, my hands trembling. Look at who we're shooting at. There was a long pause. Then, a gasp from Chun. Oh God, no. That's Captain Reynolds' unit. They were supposed to be securing the southern pass. Why are they attacking us? Doc Holloway asked, crawling over to check on Miller, who had taken a graze to the shoulder. They aren't attacking us, I said, staring at the screen. On the feed, I saw the coalition soldiers below regrouping. They weren't advancing. They were digging in, defending. We attacked them. We came over the ridge, and they saw unknown hostiles. They engaged in self-defense. But why do they look like Sepfer? Vasquez asked, her voice hollow. I looked closer at the feed. The soldiers below were wearing darkened gear, camouflage netting. But more importantly, their IFF, identification friend or foe, transponders were offline, or jammed. Chun, I said, my mind racing. Can you hack into their local comms? Not the encrypted military band. The short-range tactical radios. The ones they use for squad-level chat. I can try, Chun said. But if I breach their firewall, they'll trace it back to us. They'll know exactly where we are. Do it, Chun typed furiously. Seconds ticked by like hours. The wind howled. Below us, the enemy was tending to their wounded. I saw a medic running across the open ground, waving a white cloth. A universal sign. Got it, Chun whispered. Audio only. He patched it through. Medic up! Medic up! Johnson's hit. Damn it, who are these guys? They hit us out of nowhere. Stay down. Keep your heads down. Command says this sector is hot with SEP for insurgents. High threat level. Insurgents? Those guys were using standard coalition bounding tactics. Did you see that flanking maneuver? That wasn't ragtag militia. Shut up and shoot. Here they come again. I closed my eyes. They thought we were SEP, and we thought they were SEP. Chun, I said. Broadcast on their frequency. Use my ID code. Tell them to hold fire. Tell them it's Fire Team Echo, 4th Recon. Chun hesitated. Sarge, if this is a trap. It's not a trap. Look at them. They're scared. Just like us. Chun nodded and pressed send. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a new voice came through the speaker. Calm. Authoritative. Female. Fire Team Echo, this is Captain Sarah Vance, 2nd Infantry. Identify yourself. Why are your IFF tags dark? Why are you wearing SEP camouflage patterns? I looked down at my own uniform. We weren't wearing SEP patterns. We were wearing standard coalition winter camo. But in the low light with the mud and snow, Captain Vance, I said into my mic, our IFF tags are malfunctioning due to the electromagnetic storm. We are not SEP. We are coalition. We made a mistake. We thought you were the enemy. Please stand down. Let's talk. There was a long silence. Then prove it. Give me the challenge code for today. I recited the code. A random string of numbers and words changed daily. Code accepted, Vance said. Her voice softened, just a fraction. Stand down, Sergeant Thorne. We have wounded. Do not move. We are sending a liaison. I slumped against the rock, the adrenaline crashing out of my system, leaving me shaking. We hadn't just almost killed our allies. We had almost started a fratricidal incident that could have shattered the entire coalition effort in the sector. Sarge, Miller said, clutching his shoulder. How does this happen? How do 2 coalition units not know who the other is? I looked at Chun. The jamming. The inverted encryption. The darkened IFFs. This isn't an accident, Miller. Someone is making sure we don't recognize each other. Vasquez lowered her weapon, her face grim. Someone wants us to kill each other. The implications hung in the air, colder than the wind. If someone was manipulating our communications, masking our identities, and feeding us false intelligence, then the war we were fighting wasn't against the separatists. It was against ourselves. And I had a sinking feeling that I was the only one who had seen the pattern. The liaison from Captain Vance's unit was a young lieutenant named Graves. He climbed up the ridge with his hands raised, a white flag tied to his rifle barrel. When he reached our position, he looked exhausted. His face was smeared with soot, and his eyes were wide with a mixture of relief and confusion. Sergeant Thorne, he said, nodding respectfully. Captain Vance sends her regards. And her questions. We sat in a small circle in the lee of the rock formation, out of the wind. Doc Holloway was already treating Lieutenant Graves' minor frostbite, while Chin worked on linking our 2 communication networks. Start with the basics, I said. Why were your IFFs dark? Graves shook his head. They weren't dark on our end. Our diagnostics showed green across the board. We saw your tags as hostile/unknown. We assumed you were SEP for Special Ops. They've been known to steal our gear. And we saw your tags as hostile/unknown, I replied. We assumed you were SEP for Elite Guard because of the dark uniforms. We're wearing standard winter ops gear, Graves said, pointing to his chest. Same as you. I looked at his uniform. It was dark gray. Ours was a slightly lighter shade of gray. In the twilight, with the snow reflecting the ambient light, they could look identical. But the IFF discrepancy was the key. Chun, I said, show him the signal analysis. Chun turned the tablet around. Look at this spectrum. See these spikes? Every time our units get within 5 kilometers of each other, the IFF data gets corrupted. It's not a malfunction. It's an injection attack. Someone is inserting a hostile tag into both our systems simultaneously. Graves stared at the screen. Who has the capability to do that? To hack both coalition networks at once? Only one group, Vasquez said, her voice low. Internal Affairs. Or Cyber Command. Someone with high-level access. But why? Miller asked, wincing as Doc tightened a bandage. Why make us fight each other? To weaken us, I said. Think about it. The Separatists have been losing ground for months. They can't beat us in a straight fight. So they don't. They let us beat ourselves. Every time two coalition units engage each other by mistake, we lose men, we lose equipment, and morale plummets. We start distrusting each other. We start seeing enemies everywhere. Graves looked pale. My unit lost 3 men in that skirmish. 3 good men. Because of a glitch. Not glitch, I said. A weapon. Suddenly, Chin's tablet beeped loudly. Sarge, I'm picking up a new transmission. It's not from Vance's unit. It's not from our command either. It's coming from the valley floor. Directly between our 2 positions. Put on speaker, I ordered. The voice that came through was distorted, synthesized, cold, mechanical. Attention, coalition force. Your disunity is your weakness. Your trust is your vulnerability. Continue to fight. The harvest is nearly complete. The transmission cut off. Silence descended on the group. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The harvest, Miller whispered. What does that mean? It means they're watching us, Vasquez said, gripping her rifle. They're enjoying this. I stood up, pacing the small space. My mind was racing. If someone was manipulating our comms, they had to be close. The jamming signal was strong, which meant the source was nearby. And if they were injecting false IFF data, they needed a direct line of sight to our transponders. Chun, I said, triangulate that transmission. Pinpoint the source. On it, Chun said, his fingers flying. It's bouncing off several satellites, but wait. There's a ground-based repeater. Strong signal. It's coming from the old mining complex. Sector 9. I looked at the map on my wrist. Comp Sector 9 was a derelict industrial zone, half buried in snow. It was the perfect place to hide a jamming station. Graves, I said, turning to the lieutenant. Can you reach Captain Vance? Yes, sir. Tell her to hold her position. Do not engage anyone unless fired upon. We are going to Sector 9. We're going to shut this thing down. Graves hesitatif. You're going alone? That's a suicide mission. If there's a jamming station, it'll be guarded. We're not alone, I said, looking at my team. We have Echo, and we have the truth. If we don't stop this, more units will start killing each other. By tomorrow, the whole front could collapse into chaos. Graves nodded slowly. I'll relay the message. Good luck, Sergeant. As Graves descended the ridge, I gathered my team. Listen up. This isn't a standard recon. We're going in hot. We assume the facility is defended. We assume they know we're coming. Chun, I need you to keep a back door open into their network. If we can hack the jammer, we can broadcast the truth to every unit in the valley. And if we can't? Miller asked. Then, we blow it up, Vasquez said, checking her ammo. Simple. We moved out at dusk. The journey to Sector 9 was a nightmare of ice and shadow. We stuck to the ridgelines, avoiding the open valleys where we could be spotted. The tension was palpable. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound sounded like a footstep. After 2 hours of grueling climbing, we reached the edge of the mining complex. It was a sprawling mess of rusted metal structures and collapsed tunnels. In the center stood a large communications tower, pulsing with a faint blue light. Chun, I whispered, scan for hostiles. Chun pulled out a thermal imager. I'm getting heat signatures. Inside the main building. About 20 packs. Armed. They're patrolling the perimeter. 20 against 5, Miller said. I like those odds. Shut up, Miller, Vasquez muttered. Here's the plan, I said. Vasquez, take the high ground on that crane. Provide overwatch. Miller and Doc, you're with me. We'll infiltrate the building from the south entrance. Chun, you stay here with the comms rig. Once we're inside, you hack the main terminal. Disable the jammer. Broadcast the real IFF codes. What if they spot us? Doc asked. Then we improvise, I said. We moved into the complex. The snow muffled our footsteps. We reached the south entrance, a heavy steel door slightly ajar. I signaled for Miller to take point. He slipped inside, rifle raised. I followed, with Doc covering our rear. The interior was dark, lit only by the emergency lights. The air smelled of ozone and old oil. We moved through the corridors, sticking to the shadows. We could hear voices ahead. Guards. We reached the main control room. Through the glass window, I saw them. Men in black tactical gear, but no insignia. Mercenaries. They were sitting around consoles, monitoring screens. On the screens, I saw a live feed from the battlefield. I saw Vance's unit. I saw other coalition units. And I saw them firing at each other. It was sickening. It was like watching a puppet show where the puppets were tearing each other apart. Chun, I whispered into my comms. I'm at the door. Ready to hack. Ready. Chin's voice came back, tense. But, Sarge, I'm seeing something else. There's a secondary signal. It's not just jamming. It's commanding. Commanding what? The drones. The hunter-killer drones. They're being controlled from here. Not by AI. By humans. My blood ran cold. The drones that had been strafing our positions, the ones that had caused so many casualties, they were being piloted remotely from this room. Take them out, I said. Non-lethal, if possible. We need intel. I kicked the door open. Freeze. Coalition force. I shouted, raising my rifle. The mercenaries spun around, surprised. For a second, nobody moved. Then, chaos erupted. Vasquez opened fire from the crane outside, shattering the windows and forcing the mercenaries to take cover. Miller and I surged into the room, firing controlled bursts. 2 mercenaries went down. The others scrambled for their weapons. Doc threw a flashbang. The room exploded in white light and deafening noise. In the confusion, I rushed to the main console. Chin's avatar appeared on the screen. I'm in, giving you root access. I typed furiously, my fingers slipping on the cold keys. Disable jamming. Reset IFF protocols. Broadcast identity confirmation to all units in Sector 4. Doing it. Chin said. Wait, there's a firewall. It's biometric. I need an admin override. I looked around the room. One of the mercenaries was lying unconscious near a desk. On his belt was a keycard. I grabbed it and swiped it. Access granted, Chun said. Jamming disabled. IFF reset. Broadcasting now. Outside, the sky lit up. Not with explosions, but with flares. Green flares. The signal for friend. I slumped against the console, breathing hard. We had done it. We had stopped the madness. But then, the screen changed. A video feed popped up. It was a woman. She was sitting in a chair, facing away from the camera. She turned slowly. It was Captain Sarah Vance. But she wasn't in the valley. She was in a sterile, white room. And she was smiling. Hello, Sergeant Thorne, she said. You're smarter than I expected. I stared at the screen, my mind reeling. Vance? What is this? You shut down the jammer, she said calmly. But you didn't shut down the war. You just revealed the next phase. The screen went black. And then the doors to the control room slammed shut. Locked. Sarge, Miller yelled. We're trapped. From the shadows of the room, more figures emerged. Not mercenaries. Soldiers. Coalition soldiers. But they weren't wearing our patches. They were wearing Vance's patch. And they had their rifles pointed at us. The barrels of 12 rifles stared us down. The soldiers wore the insignia of the 2nd Infantry, but their faces were blank, devoid of the camaraderie I had seen in graves. They moved with a precision that mirrored the enemy we had fought earlier. It was like looking into a mirror that reflected only the cold, mechanical aspect of warfare. Captain Sarah Vance stepped forward from the shadows of the corridor. She wasn't the weary commander I had spoken to on the radio. She was sharp, immaculate, her uniform crisp despite the chaos of the war zone. Her eyes were hard, calculating. Sergeant Thorne, she said, her voice echoing in the confined space. You have caused quite a stir. Disabling the jammer was inconvenient, but predictable. Inconvenient. I spat, keeping my rifle lowered, but ready. You've been making us kill each other. You've been murdering our own people. Murder is such a strong word, Vance said, walking closer. She gestured to the screens on the wall, which now showed various coalition units standing down, confused but no longer firing. I prefer pruning. The coalition has become bloated, Sergeant. Corrupt. Inefficient. We have generals who care more about politics than victory. We have supply chains that bleed money. We have soldiers who fight for paychecks, not for purpose. She stopped a few feet from me. I'm creating a new order. A unified force. But to build something new, you must first destroy the old. By turning your units against each other, I am weeding out the weak, the confused, the ones who cannot adapt. Those who survive, they will be the core of my new army. You're insane, Miller said, his voice trembling with rage. Am I? Vance smiled. Look at the results. Before my intervention, the war was a stalemate. Now the separatists are terrified. They don't know who to fight. And your coalition? It's waking up. You're questioning your leaders. You're questioning your reality. That is the first step toward true loyalty. Loyalty to me. She turned to her soldiers. Take them. Bring them to the holding cell. I have a special assignment for Sergeant Thorne. As the soldiers moved in to disarm us, I looked at Chun. He was still at the console, his hands hidden beneath the desk. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. He wasn't done. I let them take my rifle. I let them push me toward the door. But as we passed the main server rack, I stumbled. Clumsy. One of the guards sneered, grabbing my arm. In that split second, Chun hit the enter key. The lights in the facility flickered. Then, every screen in the room flashed red. A siren began to wail. System alert, a robotic voice announced. External broadcast initiated. Source, Fire Team Echo. Content, full log of command communications. Vance's eyes widened. What did you do? Chun stood up, smiling. I didn't just disable the jammer, Captain. I recorded everything. Every order. Every confession. And I just broadcast it to every coalition headquarters in the hemisphere, including the Pentagon and the press. Vance froze. Her carefully constructed narrative, her secret war, her pruning, it was all out there. Exposed. You fool, she hissed. You've doomed us all. No, I said, straightening up. I've just given everyone the truth. And the truth is, you're not a general. You're a traitor. The guards hesitated. They looked at Vance, then at each other. The spell of authority was broken. They were soldiers, yes, but they had sworn an oath to the Constitution, not to Sarah Vance. One of the guards lowered his rifle. Then another. Vance drew her sidearm, aiming it at me. You think this changes anything? The war will continue. Chaos will reign. Maybe, I said, but not under your command. Before she could pull the trigger, Vasquez's bullet shattered the window above us. The shot didn't hit Vance, but it hit the control panel next to her, sparking wildly. She flinched, dropping her gun. Miller and Doc tackled the nearest guards. I lunged for Vance. We grappled on the floor, a messy, desperate struggle. She was strong, trained in close-quarters combat, but I was fueled by the anger of seeing my friends die for her game. I pinned her arms, kicking her weapon away. It's over, Sarah, I panted. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a strange mix of hatred and admiration. You command both sides, Elias. You always have. You just didn't know it. What does that mean? You led them to me, she whispered. And you led me to them. You are the perfect soldier. Obedient. Effective. Deadly. You don't question. You just execute. Until now. Sirens wailed in the distance. Real sirens. Coalition military police. Reinforcements. Vance stopped struggling. She lay still, accepting her fate. The war isn't over, Sergeant. It's just changed shape. Epilogue: the investigation took months. Captain Sarah Vance was court-martialed, but the damage was done. The coalition was fractured. Trust was broken. Units that had fought each other in the Kalen Valley struggled to serve together again. The Mirror War, as the media called it, became a symbol of the fragility of modern conflict. I was promoted, not because I wanted it, but because they needed someone to rebuild Fire Team Echo. Miller recovered from his wound, but he never joked about his toes again. Vasquez transferred to a training unit, saying she was tired of the ambiguity. Chin disappeared into Cyber Command, working on new encryption protocols that couldn't be hacked. I stayed in the field. Sometimes, late at night, I wake up sweating, hearing the sound of those drones. I remember the faces of the men we almost killed. I remember Vance's words. You command both sides. She was right, in a way. In war, there are no true sides. There is only the machinery of death, and the people who operate it. And sometimes, the person pulling the strings is wearing the same uniform as you. I lead my new team now. We train harder. We question more. We check our IFFs twice. Because I know now that the greatest enemy isn't the one across the border. It's the doubt in your own heart. And the silence between the radio bursts. The war continues. But we are awake now. And that makes all the difference.